Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. Today's conversation promises to be an insightful one with a remarkable guest. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, we're so glad you're here. Our goal is to bring you closer to the innovative leaders and thinkers shaping our future. And today, we're thrilled to welcome David Acosta. David is currently a board member of the Information Professionals Association. He's a colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves, commanding the 2nd Brigade, 91st Training Division, headquartered in Denver, Colorado, and with subordinate elements in 8 locations across 6 states in the western U.S. He's also a professor of practice of technical operations in the information environment at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. In addition, he also publishes the Ghost Post, which is a really fantastic weekly information operations media roll-up, and is a PhD student studying international studies at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. Colonel Acosta has served in IO positions from the tactical to the strategic level all around the world. He has operational experience in Kosovo and Bosnia with NATO as an IO planner, served as a deception officer and deputy IO chief during 2 tours in Iraq, supported Army planning efforts on the Army staff at the Pentagon, and commanded an Army IO battalion for 4 years. Furthermore, he served 2 years as the Assistant Deputy Director of Joint Warfighting Development, Joint Staff J7, overseeing the developing and implementation of the Joint Warfighting Concept. He's a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy and the Naval Postgraduate School and the U.S. Army War College, and presently resides in Norfolk, Virginia. Welcome to Tipping Spears, Dave.
Thanks, Hannah. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
So can you start off today by telling us where your story begins?
So my story begins, and it'll kind of this theme with my dad. So I was born in Germany in the mid-70s. My dad was stationed there in the Army. And on his 3rd tour in Germany, the 2nd time we lived there, I think it was 1981. And that really, we lived there for 2 years, 1981 to 83. And those 2 years, as a 6-year-old to basically an 8-year-old, helped shape the rest of my life. My dad was, it's now called the Marshall Center, but back then he was studying it was called the Russian Institute in Garmisch, Germany. And, we would joke about what a hardship tour it was there in southern Bavaria, but it was an amazing time. And part of my dad's job while he was a student there was to travel to Eastern Europe. And so one of my favorite memories of all time, to kind of put the Cold War into perspective and shaping moments, is we went to Budapest, Hungary in December 1981. And back then, there's none of these open borders or anything like that. We drove in our Chevy Malibu station wagon from Garmisch to Budapest through Austria. And when you got to the border with between Austria and Hungary, there was like no man's land. Crossing, and it took forever. And so we're sitting at the Hungarian side, and it's late in the day, and it's cold, and we didn't have child seats or any of that. It was like my parents were in the front, I was in the back, and my sister, who was 3, was in the way back with the suitcases. And all of a sudden, my dad kind of notices in the rearview mirror a couple Hungarian border guards circling around the back of the car, and he gets a little nervous. But my dad's a cool cat. He always has been. And hey guys, don't turn around. He's like, what's going on back there? There's a couple Hungarian, the border guards are looking in the back of the car. What, do they see anything? And I'm like, I don't know, Dad. I don't see anything. He's like turns to my sister Eileen. He's like, see anything? And she starts giggling. My dad looks back, and they're making faces at my sister, and she's making faces back. And right then and there, my dad knew exactly what to do. He gets out of the car, has a pack of American cigarettes, and starts talking to these guys. And just right then and there, like, he totally broke the real, it became this sort of moment that wow, this is diplomacy in action, cigarette diplomacy. And he did a couple more trips to Hungary, and would tell us these stories about letting Russia or Soviet Army officers drive his car to kind of show him, and they had never even seen an automatic before, let alone like an American car, and they thought it was the neatest thing. And that was he and his classmates. I mean, those were the stories that as a young guy I was taught. The next year we went to Berlin in December of 1982, and to, again, to see Checkpoint Charlie, the Berlin Wall, it was, we went over to East Berlin with a friend of my father's, um, and it was interesting because a couple of years later he would be killed by the Soviets over there as part of what was called the Potsdam Mission, Lieutenant Colonel Nicholson. And so, really kind of highlighted the, the realities of the Cold War we lived in. So, but right then and there, I kind of developed this picture of a much bigger world in those 2 years, and it stayed with me this whole time. So,
No, it's fascinating to hear those experiences and how it kind of really shaped your paradigm. So I know your father was in the Army. What sparked your interest in serving in the military, and how did you end up at the Air Force Academy and then back in the Army?
the short answer is the movie Top Gun. Yeah, so I saw Top Gun. We were living in Annapolis, Maryland at the time, and um, I was like, I am totally going to be a naval aviator. I'm going to fly jets. I'm going to be Tom Cruise. Um, and so I kind of put myself on this trajectory with school and everything. My dad encouraged it, and meanwhile, my dad was doing some really, really neat things. We were traveling around the country, but he encouraged me to do it and to pursue that. What changed though, and why I ended up at the Air Force Academy was because in the early '90s with the drawdown, the Air Force Academy had more pilot slots than the Naval Academy. Um, and then I went out and I looked at Colorado in the spring of my senior year, and it was just gorgeous. Colorado Springs, it was amazing. Um, I looked at West Point in late February of 1993, and it was gray and cold and gray. And then I go out to Colorado Springs, and it's sunny and it's warm. And then the clouds came over the mountains, and we got about 10 inches of snow that night, and then it was all melted by the next day. And I said, I want to go here. And so I got selected to go to the Air Force Academy Preparatory School there in Colorado Springs, and then did the 4 years at the academy. So 5 years total in Colorado that really would put me on a path. But while I was there, I tried flying. I didn't like it. I was like, well, I'm going to be here for 4 more years. I think what I want to do is I know the Army. I know what my dad did. I saw him, his career. It looked really interesting, some neat stuff. So why not pursue that? And decided, yeah, early on that I was going to finish the academy and go into the Army, and that's what I did. Thanks to some great Army exchange officers out there that I'll talk about in a little bit.
So was there a particular event or person that kind of served as a catalyst for your career?
Yeah, I think, in terms of people and catalysts and events, I think there's been about two events and a couple of people. So flashback even before when I was in high school, my dad deployed as military advisor to El Salvador in 1990, 91. And I got to go visit him twice towards the end of their civil war.
Oh, wow.
And well, some kids went and got summer jobs or went to summer camp. I was learning how to field strip M16, learning, and there's pictures of me up on a roof with a 50 cal, and I was talking, interestingly enough, I remember talking to the PSYOP officer and the civil affairs officer, and hearing stories about how they were doing propaganda, or they're doing PSYOP, down there. And it all kind of stayed with me. When I was at the Air Force Academy and starting my third class or sophomore year, we had a leadership series, and there was another event that sparked my sort of path down the information operations field. One of the speakers was a guy by the name of Tim Thomas, and he was a retired Army lieutenant colonel, a Soviet foreign area officer who worked at the Foreign Military Studies office at Fort Leavenworth. I knew we had a family friend who also worked there by the name of Les Grau, but I went to his lecture, and it was all about Russian information warfare. And to this day, I'll never forget. He kind of started off his lecture about, the Russians have said that if they are ever the victim of a cyber attack, they won't rule out the use of nuclear weapons in
Mhm.
retaliation. And it was like, whoa, I thought we were past that kind of thing now. But
Yeah.
this was 1995, and cyber and computer network operations were really kind of in their infancy. Um, and so, but I sat there and I just took all this in, and I was fascinated by it. It was some really interesting things to hear, and kind of exposed me to, as a cadet.
Mhm.
Fast forward a year later, and I'm fully engaged on going down the Army path. There was an Army exchange officer who showed up at the academy in the summer of '96, by the name of Boyd Brown. And Boyd was, he was high. Well, he still is high speed, low drag. He had just come from the 82nd Airborne. He had a combat patch from Desert Storm. He had
Mhm.
commanded an infantry company in the 82nd, and he and uh, another guy, Tom Rowe, I think was his name, were decided to, kind of whoop a bunch of us into shape so that we could become Army officers coming out of the Air Force Academy. And so Boyd helped train us, and we spent about 2 years training, doing various Army training over the week, once a month. Um, but in the spring of my senior year, as I was getting ready to become an artillery officer, Boyd had been selected for this brand new career field, that he started telling me about. He's like, oh, this field, it's about information as a weapons system. It's called information operations, and we do these really cool stuff. And he's, and I'm listening, and I'm like, this is, in my mind, I was like, oh, this is kind of lame. Who would do this sort of thing? I don't know. I don't know. All right, I'm gonna go artillery, and I'm gonna go down my path. And so, fast forward 2 years later, I'm in Kosovo, and I was at one of the big army camps, and who comes walking down the street but Boyd Brown? He's like, Dave, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm doing this. I'm meeting with key leaders, and I'm handing out handbills that talk about why we're here and what we're doing. And he's like, you're doing IO, and I was like, oh yeah. So that was another key event. The last one, though, and I think it's pretty remarkable, occurred at Fort Leavenworth in 2000, in June of 2007, and that was when I went to the Army Information Operations qualification course. And you talk about, you know just serendipity in terms of a great group of people coming together, just that, we all kind of showed up. Three of us had just come from Naval Postgraduate School. Other guys like Andy Whiskeyman were in our class. There were countless others, and you talk about a bunch of superheroes
Mhm.
who, we were all there at the same time learning, and then we would go out and we would define Army information operations for the next. I think, we're still doing it. So, 18 years later. And it was really you don't really appreciate it at the time, but now, you know we had Andy on last week, and
Yeah.
there's others that are, Colonel Kelvin Mode is up at the Army War College teaching, and I'm doing my thing, and there's a host of others that are still doing great work, even out of uniform, which
Mhm.
which has been huge. So, that event right there was pretty pivotal, looking back.
So I know, every journey kind of has its hurdles. Can you tell us kind of what some of the biggest obstacles, you faced in your career were and kind of how you overcame them?
Yeah. So I think that I've really seen for me, it's, I think, about three major hurdles in my
Mhm.
career. The first was that sort of transition from the CAT Air Force into the Army. It was a very steep learning curve.
Mhm.
Plus, I dealt with a lot of, like, oh, you're one of those Air Force guys. Oh, and so I felt a lot. My first duty assignment, in Germany, it was a lot of, it was a steep learning curve. and thankfully I had some really good leaders who kind of gave me he corrected me, gave me some room to learn, make some mistakes, and carry on, which was huge. I'm grateful to those guys, those leaders, for letting me do that. Second big hurdle occurred towards the end of that time when I deployed to Bosnia in the fall of 2002. I Through luck, I ended up. I started off with one job at a small base camp, and then got asked to go down to Sarajevo, where the NATO command was. And as a very junior captain, I think I'd been a captain for less than a year. I was made an IO planner at this multinational, joint headquarters there in Sarajevo. And I was let's see. I was definitely fighting above my weight class, if you will. And I quickly found myself, it was one of these like sink or swim environments. And within a few months, I found myself planning information operations, not just with our NATO partners, but with the U.S. Treasury, the State Department over at the embassy, the FBI, and a whole host, from the internet, the intelligence community. And we were going at the time, we were going after these war criminal financiers and doing targeted sanctions and things. At the time, it was all pretty new at the time. And this was all while the sort of the war drums towards Iraq were going. But we had a lot of freedom to do what we needed to do. And I just remember my boss, who was an American one-star, turned to us one night. He's like, "They never taught me any of this stuff at the War College," and I was like, "Sure, they never taught me any of this stuff at the Officer Basic course." And he kind of gave me a dirty look, and then I shut up. But it was again, significant. I had good leaders there who again gave me chances to succeed and fail. I remember one night, my last operation, we would go do these raids to basically look for war criminals, or if we had intelligence. And it's like 2 in the morning. I'm supposed to leave like within 24 hours and fly out, but we're doing this last mission, and it goes wrong. There's no war criminal. But my job was I would create these lists of talking points for key leaders, and our the head of headquarters stabilization forces, an American 3-star, would call the Bosnian president, the Republic of Srpska president, and tell them what we were doing. And so we thought all the phone numbers were good. And I'm sitting in this 3-star's office at 2 in the morning, and the number's not going through. And I'm sweating. I'm like, this is a significant emotional event. I had one job. And thankfully there was a brand new 06 who was his XO, and he steps in. He's like, "Sir, this isn't Captain Acosta's fault. This is my fault. I accept responsibility." And I was kind of shocked because didn't know what to do. I wasn't used to 06s stepping in my path. And the 3-star said, "Hey guys, it's nobody's fault. This is fog and friction of war. Like, just we'll get it figured out. Nobody's dead. It's gonna be okay." And I was really impressed by those two leaders. Lieutenant General Ward was the headquarters, or was a stabilization forces commander at the time, and he was just a great boss to work for. So that was a huge hurdle, but really rewarding. And then the last hurdle that I've overcome in my career, and probably the most significant, occurred in 2014 when I did a tour at the Pentagon, and it was a really exciting strategic level assignment, but my evaluations did not reflect the type of work we were doing. It was very classified. Um, and as a result, my particular year group, the selection rate to lieutenant colonel was like 35%. And I did not make lieutenant colonel. And having had a great career up to that point, being told by the Army that they didn't see me as having potential really kind of sucked me in the gut. And at the same time, my wife, who's in the Navy, her career was taking off, and I kind of read the tea leaves and opted for the Army Reserve as a way to continue serving, but to do great things and support the information operations community. And so I found looking at readiness reports, the worst Army Reserve Information Operations Battalion out of the four. And I said, I want to go there and make a difference. And that's what I did. And within a year, I'd been selected for lieutenant colonel. And then I got asked to take the battalion and stayed there for 4 years. So it all worked out.
Yeah, that's it's very, very enlightening and encouraging, Dave.
Thanks.
Some good life lessons in there.
Absolutely. And ones that I've carried with me this whole time.
Oh. So can you tell us a little bit, kind of about information operations, whether it's a kind of your work in it, or, if someone doesn't have the context of kind of like what that is or how that shows up, on the battlefield, can you kind of enlighten us about that?
Sure. It's a whole host of things. The information operations is, it's the synchronization, coordination of information related capabilities. But really it can be anything. And I mentioned in Kosovo, I was meeting with local leaders,
Mhm.
drinking Turkish coffee, which, at the time at 5 o'clock in the afternoon seemed like a good idea, but when you're up at 2 in the morning, not so good. Um, it was bringing together different capabilities and seeing their effectiveness. I think there was a story from my tour in Bosnia before we were doing the war criminal stuff. There was a period, the Orthodox Christmas was
Mhm.
after, obviously after the Christian Christmas.
Mhm.
And there was all this celebratory gunfire. I mean, it was just going up like you
Oh,
see in the
wow.
videos of Baghdad and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And those rounds don't discriminate. And
Yeah.
my boss, the one star, came down to where I was sitting and I was on my computer and he just said, Dave, put a stop to it. End this stuff. And I'm like, yes, sir. And no sooner do I do that than on one side of it, we were in a cubicle farm. One side of the cubicle, our spokesman, who was a Canadian, Yves Vanier, leans over and he says, and I'm not going to do his voice, but he said, he said, hey, I could do a press statement. We could not condone this and talk about, the dangers of all of this, of celebratory gunfire and how it doesn't discriminate. And then on the other side came the PSYOP officer, and he was like, well, we could put it out, we could come up with some products to support this, and we could take your message and put it on our radio stations and TV, and we could do a whole thing. I said, well, okay. And then, we basically, went to the whiteboard and we, mapped it all
Yeah.
out. And in about 20 minutes, I went up to brief the J3, who was a very skeptical British colonel. And I said, sir, this is what we're going to do, and how we could, and he's like, I don't know what is this info ops stuff? I don't think it's going to work. And so, but he said, we'll give our troops authorities to go after these guys, and we can put it in, and this is how maneuver will do it, and your actions will support it. And so we hatched the plan. He said, we'll call it Op Spike, because and British always with their history are like spike. When you spike the guns on a warship, you take a big thing and they're hot and you break it open and they can't fire. It's like, okay, sure. And so we go up to the one star and brief it, and he's like, yeah, absolutely. Let's execute. We had assessed that in a week would be Orthodox New Year's, and it would be more of the same.
Mhm.
And so we hit the ground running. And for the next week, it was just this constant messaging and getting the word out and really driving this point home. And it was and then of course Mother Nature had a vote, and the following Saturday was actually the temperature dropped to like below zero, so nobody wanted to go outside. But we like to think that gunfire stopped because of our messaging. But that British colonel, the light went on for him, and he really saw, like, after that he saw the power of what information operations could do, and he became
Yeah.
a sort of a believer. And that was, I think, one of those moments that really, brought things home. Fast forward, if, gosh, 4 years later, or actually 5 years later, and I'm in Iraq, and I started off as an advisor to an Iraqi army unit, trying to teach them information operations. And while they kind of got it, they were very skeptical and they couldn't do much
Mhm.
with Yeah, and I remember trying to explain to one of my Iraqi army counterparts, and these guys were really some hard individuals. A lot of them, they were. I was working with more with sort of the Iran-Iraq war generation,
Mhm.
2007, and they could tell me things, and I was like, well, this is what I think we should be doing to the bad guys. And they're like, ah, you want to do psychological warfare? And I'm like, whatever you want to call it, sure, okay, yeah, let's get after it. But again, you make one PowerPoint slide for a guy up on division, and they pulled me out of that and moved me up, which gave me a chance to again do at the same time my thesis from the Naval Postgraduate School got published, and it was all about how Hezbollah had used deception in the 2006 war with Israel, and it got published in a magazine we had called the Iosphere, and
Mhm.
my boss looked at it and he said, "Why don't you use some of this stuff here and see what you can do?" And so the next thing I know, I was the deception officer planning things and trying to figure out some neat ways to kind of disrupt the bad guys. And it was a really exciting time. And
Mhm.
again, I had a great boss. I had a few great bosses there that let me try things and fail, and then pick myself up and
Mhm.
kept doing things, and we would try new things, and just a great team of folks. Great people like. And Angela Reber was a young captain, and now she commands an MI brigade in Germany. And my boss, Daryl Williams, went on to command U.S. Army Europe, and then General Mark Hertling was our commanding general, and he just really provided me like a laboratory to come up with crafty ideas and see what would happen. Fast forward a couple years later, and I'm back in Iraq, and a completely different experience with information operations, where we had a really good deputy commanding general by the name of Rob Baker, who came in and said, I'm going to create an IO plan. It's going to be this. It's going to focus on 5 themes with about 4 or 5 messages per, and that's all we're going to message on. And it's going to be about repetitious delivery of messages. Um, it's going to be about reacting to time-sensitive actions, and it's going to be about training the Iraqis. And you know, we were all kind of like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, get on it. Let's go." And he cracked the whip. And for about 6 months before we deployed, we built this plan for them, and it was something else. We hit the ground running, and it was just things were, as they say, we were cooking with Crisco on this the whole time we were there, with very few changes, and it was powerful. And again, I had my direct boss, guy by the name of John Mitchell, was incredible, and took a lot of the heat for us from higher up, but he gave us the freedom we needed to do to make things run. And what was, I think, the most interesting part is we steered clear of sort of the assessments and the measures of effectiveness that tend to weigh down a lot of information operations, and we focused on the measures of performance. Are we really getting, okay, you put 1,000 handbills out with a phone
Mhm.
number, does that phone number even really work?
Mhm.
Let's call these numbers and see before we go litter the city of
Mhm.
Baghdad with a bunch of useless handbills.
Mhm.
And he was all about that, and it really made I think a significant impact. And we worked closely with the public affairs community there too. We were all working together, running working groups. It really was something, I think, to
Mhm.
behold at the time.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and then to be able to years later still use a lot of those tactics, techniques, and
Mhm.
procedures as I trained my battalion and sent people out the door was still very rewarding to kind of continue to pay it forward.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
all goodness there, lots of goodness.
Well, I think one thing I think is so interesting about kind of information is that most people don't think about it having a role in warfare. They think about things that like go boom, so guns, tanks, that's what they associate with that. Can you tell us kind of how the information environment impacts, the battle space? How do those handbills and the flyers and the messages. What does that do in terms of war?
So with it's, I reflect back to, I think it was something when I was in Kosovo, our commanding general was a guy named by the name of General John Abzade, and he had made a comment about, ultimately it's all about the soldier on patrol in the middle of
Mhm,
the night. And that one soldier, everything, we do is about supporting that one soldier.
mhm,
And whether you're talking about, logistics to make sure that you have beans and bullets to making sure that they have artillery
mhm,
they can call in, the information environment is just another tool that,
mhm,
helps to shape, how that soldier operates.
mhm,
And and I think that what in a lot of ways the information that role has increased as time has gone on, in technology. And so,
yeah.
you know, it's not so much about, where the soldier is, but
Mhm,
it's about how did that soldier get there? Because now we have the means and the information environment to shape. Does that soldier even want to join the military? Is
yeah.
someone trying to convince them that's not a good career path, or that there's
Yeah.
no, there's all sorts of things wrong with it? And so, how do you create the will to
Mhm,
serve, that becomes a vulnerability that needs to be protected? Or how do you, shaping how the soldier thinks that the mission they're going to go on
mhm,
is the right mission, that they need to mobilize for the
mhm,
right reasons. Again, challenges. So, at the sort of the strategic level, those are,
mhm,
I think, new dynamics to the information environment, um, that impact the battle space. And then all the
mhm,
technical stuff, that come from there. I mean, the leaflets and the handbills,
mhm,
the text messages we send
mhm,
to, all of those continue to play a role in making sure that, that soldier doesn't have to, fight her way
mhm.
across, thousands of miles. We really want to reduce the risk that our soldiers have
Mhm,
as much as possible.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's, definitely still maintains being a shaping force.
Yeah. Well, it's such a critical element that people so often don't see, or if they see it, they don't even recognize it for what it is.
Mhm.
Both what we put out and then also what our adversaries put out towards us. So,
It really is, yeah.
yeah. So how has warfare changed? So I know you've deployed many different places, um, different wars, different conflicts. How has warfare changed since you started your career?
So since I started my career, and I'll go back to when I first showed up at the Air Force Academy Preparatory School in 1993.
Mhm,
When I showed up there, or yeah, we were coming off a Desert Storm. And Desert
mhm,
Storm, a lot of people consider it the first information war, where an ounce of silicon was worth more than any number of bullets.
mhm,
And so people were still talking about things like electronic warfare. They were talking about, the psychological operations, the deception, the decoys,
mhm,
all these things kind of,
mhm,
had their place. And then as you kind of went through the 90s and we started doing these peacekeeping missions, that sort of technical side of what I, what of information operations, maybe, and I sometimes call it, it's the pure information warfare side, kind of took a back
mhm,
seat to sort of the more human focused elements of,
mhm.
public affairs and psychological
Yeah.
operations and, key leader engagements and civil affairs. As we focused in places like the Balkans,
Mhm,
as well as, we were in Haiti, eventually Iraq and Afghanistan, where, those were the areas we focused on. Now, we did bring back things like electronic warfare, particularly, jamming against, improvised explosive devices, but it wasn't to the same scale that we see today, in places like Ukraine.
yeah.
And so, it's a sine curve. I won't say it's not circular, because
Mhm,
but it certainly kind of comes up and it goes, and it shifts between sort of the technical and then more of the human. And I think there's indications that the Army really wants to, adapt back or focus, more on the technical side, which is
mhm,
probably, I mean, there's a lot of cause for that, looking at the lessons
mhm,
learned from Ukraine. It's, it really is, you look at the things going on there, and it's about decoys, it's about electronic warfare, it's about finding ways to get in your adversary's head and
Mhm.
shape what they're thinking and destroy their will to fight.
Mhm.
So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing too is obviously is the hyperconnectivity we
Mhm.
see ourselves in. And that, things are moving at such a fast pace, and as they say, the character of war is constantly changing. It's I mean, even one of my favorite examples is I talked earlier about this great communication strategy we had in Iraq, and we were
Mhm.
getting the message out, and this was in 2010, and we focused, we had a little social media, we had a Facebook account, I think we had a Twitter account, we had press statements we were putting out, handbills, but within 6 months of us finishing that mission in 2011, the Arab Spring showed that Twitter was king, and
Mhm.
sort of just how they were able to mobilize people through Twitter has been widely studied, which I find that quickly, within 4 or 5 months. I mean, we thought we controlled the narrative and the information environment in 2010, but by within 5 months now, it was completely changed once again. And I think that's what we keep seeing. What works here and now may not work 6 months from now or a
Mhm.
year from now.
Mhm.
And so staying on top of that and constantly evolving, constantly innovating is essential to having, seeing success or being able to look forward to the future.
Mhm. Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head with kind of the hyper connectivity shifting things. I think just it's a great example you provided of just how a few months, who's controlling the narrative, whether that's thousands of users or whether that's a message coming down and out, just how quickly that's changed with technology and social media. And I think it's hard for us to wrap our, even though we were all living in it, now it's like, at least for me, it's still hard to wrap my head around the rapid scale at which it has changed and just evolved. Just the rapid rate feels so much faster than what other technologies rolling out has been.
Absolutely. And, that reminds me of another, example of, this sort of hyperconnectivity and how quickly things have
Yeah.
changed. Data point. So in Iraq, the AQI, Al Qaeda of Iraq, or
Hmm.
the violent extremists, when they would make these IED videos of IEDs blowing
Hmm.
up U.S. vehicles, it would take anywhere from on the order of 12 to 24 hours for them to record themselves digging the IED in,
Hmm.
convoy going by, blowing it up, taking that footage, and then getting it uploaded to the internet.
Yeah.
24 hours in Ukraine in 2022, part of the role of these hunter killer teams that had the anti-tank weapons, you had a drone flyer and you had somebody with an AT, anti-tank weapon, and then you had somebody recording it all. And
Mhm.
they could upload these videos onto TikTok of Russian tanks having their turrets popped off in like 2 or 3 minutes
Yeah.
and getting up there. And being able to do that really just is huge. You're
Yeah.
almost getting to the point of live streaming the war, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
Um, so I think again, it's a very powerful tool. These sort of created these uh, information enabled
Hmm.
warriors that's their job. You've got
Hmm.
that's what sells.
Hmm.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, I remember my family, I had soldiers deployed in Desert Storm, and I was a small child. And I remember the news came on with some live footage from Desert Storm. I had uncles, I had cousins, they're all there. And I remember being a kid and my grandmother seeing that on the TV, and I'm just like spellbound, just standing there. I'd never seen anything like that before. But I remember knowing, I was like, we just hugged them and sent them off to this place, and here, and it's just soldiers on a screen. I don't know. Is that my uncle? Is that my cousin? And my grandmother freaked, Dave, and she ran. She saw that, and she grabbed me up and was like, turn the TV off. We can't be watching that. And she put it together. Was like, she'd survived wars, loved ones in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and she didn't watch live footage of what was going on, and it really panicked her. And as you're kind of describing what we're seeing now, just the kind of impact beyond the battlefield in terms of not just loved ones and families, but kind of the public perception of stuff with videos being uploaded in a matter of minutes, or even AI generated videos, this deep fake stuff. It's like a whole new element when I think about how it's progressed. Because like with just the impacts of what we'll be seeing and how that can be information operations in and of itself to a not just a geographical, not just the population living in the war zone, right? Like so much broader.
Oh, absolutely. I think, I mean, I've been telling people for years, the fight, we used to say, hey, the fight begins when you get over to the combat area. No, it's now. I mean,
Yeah.
we're dealing with it. And, I've told the other services, I mean, I could see a situation where a Navy ship commander gets relieved because someone finds, obscene material on their personal laptop, or they've sent a ghost email to, some admiral saying
Yeah.
that they don't believe in the administration, and it gets them fired like right off the back,
Yeah.
until an investigation. And that's how you remove key leaders,
Mm-hmm.
and and create that disruption. So I mean, it's the reality. And so how do you, kind of a common theme, I think, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but it's just, this cognitive security. How do we
Mm-hmm.
protect against that?
Mm-hmm.
How do we
Yeah.
sort of, instill that sort of resilience, that
Mm-hmm.
cognitive resilience?
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the reality of the environment we're all in.
Yeah. It is. And then trying to figure out what does the future hold,
Yeah.
and trying to, let's not get ready for the last war, but how do we prepare
Yeah.
ourselves for the next one,
Mm-hmm.
or the next
Mm-hmm.
conflict?
Mm-hmm.
So
So, what career advice do you have for the next generation of professionals, interested in this career path?
I'd say, the biggest thing, and like seek your own opportunity, seek your own career path. Don't, there are prescribed paths that you should take,
Mm-hmm.
but don't be afraid to try something new, that, but understand, you know, as much as your career can take. Um, and I took some, what looked like really lucrative assignments, and they didn't work out, the way I had hoped. But in the end, I mean, it gave me new opportunities to pursue different things. And so but also don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid to try new things, seek out opportunities, and educate yourself as much as possible. I've found it, I'm taking these PhD classes in
Mm-hmm.
things like international and political economy, and studying theories that I'm like, wow, I wish we could apply this to the information environment.
Yeah.
There's a paper that was written about, almost 25 years ago, about varieties of capitalism, and it talks about that there's really only two varieties of capitalism, A or B. And as I read it, a lot of people torn apart the article, but over the years, but it's like, no, you're either this type or you're this type. Let's and when you do that, it kind of gives you some ways to examine political economies. And I was like, well, wait a minute, why couldn't you do the same thing with information environments? You
Mm-hmm.
have sort of the Western model, like the US, and then you have sort of the totalitarian model, like Russia or
Yeah.
China. And when you kind of group them into those two, and then you look at ways to, study the environments, it becomes a little bit more manageable versus,
Mhm.
sort of, constantly trying to figure out all the independent variables that can impact things. So, I think that's been really, try things, study things, look for solutions, in places that you not wouldn't have thought of before. Um, I'm taking a modeling and simulation class right now, and looking at how, how can I apply something like, uh, dis discrete event simulations to information operations, and how does that all come about? Not there yet, but I'm trying. Um, So it's, yeah, really get out there and take chances and write about it. You've got to, I
Mhm.
think that's another thing is defend your thoughts, get them out there.
Mhm.
They may not go anywhere, but at the same time, if someone's going to counter it, they've got to write something, and that's important too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really, the world's your oyster, and seeking those opportunities and studying and figuring out how to step up when nobody else is willing to do something is is huge. Because all my opinions obviously have been shaped by the last 25 years, but
Mhm.
theirs are being shaped by a lot more. And so hopefully they can, what they're seeing, and they're going to take the lessons from Ukraine and other places and carry on and be the next generation of information warriors
Mhm.
for us.
What books would you recommend?
So funny you should mention that. I always keep my books like right here, and so I've got a few of them. So the first one that I would highly recommend for any practitioner is is the book Wasp, which was written by Eric Russell. It's a sci-fi book, but it's all about a sort of a human insurgent that goes to an alien world and does a bunch of information operations and really kind of, it's a good story to kind of understand how to be, as he puts it, the wasp, get people swinging, kind of get people all spun up about things. Great story, easy read. The next one I think is important is Active Measures by Thomas
Mhm.
Rid. It is sort of the, I think, fundamental understanding of active measures, disinformation,
Mhm.
and sort of political warfare over the last, I'd say, 100 years between
Mhm.
us and the Russians in particular. And it really gets you a sort of a good understanding and depth of that problem set. Next one is Thaddeus Holt's The Deceivers,
Mhm.
which is a all-encompassing book on deception in World War II. And it's if you can't see it, but I've tabbed it a lot. I used it for my thesis, but I also have used it to kind of look at different things that worked or didn't work, but also sort of the human elements and how a lot of these planners all knew each other or how they worked, and it wasn't it was definitely an art, not a science,
Mhm.
and they figured all these things out. Uh, Next one, um, 7 Seconds to Die by John Antal is a study of the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, and it really highlights sort of at the tactical level. Um, I mean, he wrote this and was presenting this in the war happened in the fall of 2020. He kind of wrote this and was preaching this in the summer of 21 and into the
Oh,
fall of
wow.
22 about how first person drones were going to
Yeah.
revolutionize the battlefield, and the combination of unmanned combat aerial vehicles, UCAVs, and loitering munitions were really game changers. And when I was a student at the Army War College, he gave us a lecture and talking about it, and it was like, well, wow. Um, and then Ukraine happened and reinforced it all. But if you study sort of, I'm a history guy as well. You study sort of the Balkan Wars before World War One. A lot of the things that you would see throughout World War One were all highlighted in the early Balkan Wars, and the war in Nagorno-Karabakh did just that. It was the same sort of thing. It was, um, loitering munitions, and the idea that, when Armenian soldiers heard one of these drones flying over, they had 7 seconds where they were going to die. They had
Wow.
7 seconds to hide. So really, really a powerful book. And then the last one is White Sun War by General Mick Ryan, and this is a future war for the fight for Taiwan. Up to
Mhm.
this point, a couple authors have written sort of the future war from the naval perspective. Ghost Fleet by Peter
Mhm.
Singer, and then Admiral Stavridis wrote 2034, but he talks about the war actually on Taiwan,
Mhm.
and it's a good, I think it's a good study of what can go right if we make the right decisions in terms of innovation and acquisition in the near term, and how we bring all this fight, all these tools to
Mhm.
bear. He does a good job of talking information operations as well. It's woven in there. It's I grew up on Tom Clancy novels.
Mhm.
And so, I would compare this to Red Storm Rising or Team
Okay.
Yankee, Harold Coyle, and it's an easy read.
Oh.
So, those are some of the books that between, when I wear my Army hat and I'm telling soldiers what to read, and then when I wear my IO hat, same thing. And then the other one, Origins of Victory by Andrew Krepanevich, is another
Mhm.
outstanding one to understand sort of the military, culture of innovation and where it can
Mhm.
succeed. So
And that's a great book roundup. I jotted a few titles down. I'm going to add to my winter reading list, so I appreciate it.
no problem. Yeah. All yeah, they're worth it.
What current projects are you working on that you can tell us about?
So I got a few things. I'll start with my wearing my IPA hat. Part of the one of the things we're working on at the Information Professionals Association, and I'm really kind of building a community of interest, is looking at the creating a cognitive security certification. We talk a lot about cognitive security, cognitive warfare, cognitive resilience, but trying to create sort of that benchmark of what it really means to be a cognitive security professional. What are the standard? What is the standard? We thought you hear a lot in the news. Hey, what is the standard for this?
Mhm.
We could probably do. I think the IPA through the lens of what it's done is in a good position to say, hey, look, let's kind of create this standard. Let's create some sort of program that gets people in here, from various backgrounds, personas, whether it's the military, whether it's the media, whether it's
Mhm.
private industry, or just the concerned citizen that wants to say, hey, yeah, I'm a cognitive security professional. I can recognize real from the fake. I can
Mhm.
understand what the threat picture looks like, and I can help build cognitive resilience within my own community.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's kind of a project that and the IPA, we're all volunteers, so we're doing it on our free time, but if people are interested, they can contact me, and we're trying to get some momentum here about how really kind of creating that certification for this community and for others. So that's one project. Um, along the lines of cognitive warfare, I've had the privilege and the pleasure of working with one of my colleagues at Naval Postgraduate School, Julie McLennan, who she had this idea for a cognitive warfare war game, and
Mhm.
we've been working on it to take what was a tabletop game of hex game of moving pieces and trying to influence your opponent's side to with the help of some great high school interns over the summer. We turned this into a sort of the creation of a on-screen game, which eventually we hope to put online and be completely automated. And so that was really a neat project, and I want to see that kind of come to fruition. Another thing on the cognitive warfare side, I've been involved with what's called the Multinational Capabilities Development Conference, which
Mhm.
is a Joint Staff J7 sponsored group of not just NATO countries, but also partners such as Austria, Switzerland, Australia, South Korea, and they do project cycles, 2-year project cycles, and so they're looking at a countering cognitive warfare handbook for leaders. How do you educate, hey leaders, here's how you can get after it. Now, here's how we can protect our formations both before, during competition, but then also in conflict. And then I think you know, just getting and then always the ghost post, getting the word out, doing that really kind of keeps things going. There's so much to do, only so much time, so it's but it's a lot of fun, and it's great to see people interested and see what else, what new ideas people have, and then
Mhm.
encouraging them to get after it.
Yeah.
And a case in point, I've got a call, after this with a war college classmate of mine in Fiji who's working, looking for ideas about how to, counter Chinese influence in Fiji. He works at the U.S. Embassy, and it's like I'm like, well, I know a guy over here who can do this, and I know somebody over here she can do this. Maybe we all sit together on a call and figure out, let's
Yeah.
uh, let's let's work this together. I think a couple good ideas, and maybe I wouldn't turn down a trip to Fiji, but bringing it all together to like let's get after this and help shape this. And we don't have a budget, we don't, but we have ideas and we can make these things happen. So, that I think those sorts of things, it's yeah, keeps me busy, keeps me off the streets. So
It's a fascinating field. Stuff's always changing. So
it really is.
on
It
the
really
front.
is. And there's other things too that, I haven't talked to anybody. So my wife is a Navy meteorologist, oceanographer, and she is, I mean, I've talked sort of the cognitive piece, but the physical sciences and what that entails, and that's a whole field in and of itself that it's just started. We're just starting to see the bigger picture about
Yeah.
how that impacts, you know, case in point, in Taiwan. When you get down to the weather picture of when the island would really be a target for an invasion, it's not that wide. I mean, the typhoon season is pretty
Yeah.
significant, and so being able to kind of see those pictures and make decisions based off it is key. Same thing with in Ukraine. There's only certain times a year you can really launch an
Mhm.
offensive because of mud and cold
Mhm.
and ice and everything like that. And so being able to understand that is yeah, it's more important than I think ever before. So
Mhm. So Dave, do you have any final words of advice or kind of parting thoughts for the audience today?
in terms of, I think, parting words and advice, I just encourage everybody to, really work together and
Mhm.
share ideas and get after it. Um, there's I think there's really no bad ideas, or maybe bad execution of those ideas at times, but all I there's you know th- get after it, and there's always somebody, I think, willing to listen, and we'll either say, hey, we tried it this way and it didn't work, but that was 15 years ago. Try it again. Hey, there's messaging people's a lot easier than it was 15 years ago,
That's
so
true.
try it.
Yeah.
And just, yeah, really learn and live and explore and see what happens, because my generation, we're all the Iraq and the Afghanistan guys, I think we're fading out, and we'll be the like we said, we're the graybeards,
Mhm.
but I think we've got to encourage everybody to keep trying. So yeah, we'll see what the future holds.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for sharing your insights and experiences today. Your contributions to our nation continue to impact so many, and we appreciate all your efforts and service.
Well, thank you so much, Hannah. It's been a real pleasure to be here today.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think about the future. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.